All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. With us, we have Carl Valle and always Joseph Johnson of Ultimate Athlete Concepts. I'm Jeff Moyer of DC Sports Training. Carl, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Uh,
Appreciate it.
Carl's coming from us here in Massachusetts right now.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of Kendall Square. I'm in the MIT area of the greater Boston area. Oh, okay. And I'm at the Innovation Center here, and obviously taking advantage of Skype, so that's not exactly innovation yet, but I'm just really excited. The weather's been cooperative, so I'm looking forward to going on vacation on Friday. So
nice, man. Well, again, I appreciate you taking the time. Joseph and I, our whole premise, kind of with the this podcast, is to cut through the BS and let's get down to what do you do to help your athletes get better, more the practical side rather than the theory. But before, if you wouldn't mind, before we kind of get into that, just give a little background on yourself and how you kind of got into this professional and end up where you are and near MIT and everything you're doing.
Yeah, I'll give a 60-second breakdown of my bio. It's not an exciting athletic bio by any means. Like anyone, you start doing Little League when you're 6 years old and then move all the way up to high school sports. And I did track and swimming. Swimming, captain of the team. We won 3 state titles. But, with a high school, every league, there's 30,000 high schools. Everyone's a champion when you're in high school. And I wasn't really D1 material. So the writing was on the wall when you're reading the results of like Swimming World or Track and Field News. You realize that, hey, you're a participant, but you're not a competitor. And not going to D1 or not being able to go to a D1 school to compete made me realize I could go to any school anywhere just to focus on education. So I went to the University of South Florida. I like Tampa. I visited Florida. If you're a Massachusetts person, specifically this last winter, when you're 18, sometimes you have enough of the snow. And I said, I just want to get a break. And so down there in Tampa for, basically 6 years after school, I was there for a few years and got my degree, the School of Special Education and also Physical Education. So like the education side, I focus on wellness and exercise science. Physical education was sort of like the large umbrella, and then of course education. So those are the things that kind of make me. Did a little bit of track and field and swim coaching, starting when I was a lifeguard at 16 years old. You got Friday swim, and you're like kind of like the substitute teacher for the club swimming program. Did that, and I really liked the instruction side. Didn't think I was going to be coaching, but liked it because who doesn't like being around sports? And if you like the sport that you're competing at, it was a no-brainer for me. Track was something that I wasn't really good at in high school. Not that I was great in swimming. You always have that saying where your PR is some middle school athlete, female or male, is warming up with that. And I'm sure at the World Junior Nationals or whatever, the Junior Worlds with FINA, someone's warming down with my PR in the 100-meter fly. But my point being is that, being a fan of sport, I always wanted to be participating in that. I didn't know about sports performance in the mid-'90s. You thought you just worked at a Gold's Gym and did personal training. I wasn't in a football program in high school down in Dallas, or California where, there's a professional strength coach maybe at a high school level. So I never knew about a strength and conditioning coach. My only experience was either track, you go to the weight room after practice, or with swimming, you wake up and do morning weights with the team coach. So watching these Olympic athletes in Tampa, because it was a hotbed back in the mid to late 90s, freak mode. When you talk, go on YouTube, Linford Christie, single leg hurdle hops over like 39, 42-inch hurdles. The video shows them, and that was real. That type of stuff was just monsters. So then you realize, what? Maybe the cardiac rehab is not what I want to do, and I focused my energies on that. There was a lot of pro athletes training, and it was just like you could walk around. There could be some really talented sprinters that had no coach. So it was a basically accidental transition to track and field because I always thought I'd be a swim coach. And I coached high school swimming and did high school track, but it started to wane more into the outdoors, lifting weights. I still do some stuff with triathlon and for swimming, but it's more of the power development side. Not coaching actively with swimming. I am still doing some stuff with track and field. And obviously with this World Championships, a lot of the guys that I work with are not making that standard because if you're not running sub 10 or if you're not running 48 in the hurdles, you ain't not going to make money. So the struggles with myself sending people to like Beijing in 2008 or other world championships is that being in the Northeast most of the time is you're just not going to get a lot of walk-on type talents. You're just not going to have that. I was lucky in 2008 when I ran into a hurdler from Puerto Rico, and he wasn't even full-time training then. Now that I'm spending more time in Florida, it's given me the opportunities to have training camps, work with national teams, and doing a lot of the data collection. So that's where I am now. I lied. It's not 60 seconds, but it's more like 5 minutes.
It's all good. Awesome. So now from that, how did you get into, I mean, you briefly mentioned working with the Puerto Rican hurdler, but like studying the sports science, European sports science, I know you're kind of a bit influenced by that, if you wouldn't mind kind of going into your pedagogical studies of sports science.
Yeah, so I think the fairest thing was when I was in high school, and I think it was the day of the prom. This is how much of a geek I was. Mike Barrowman, the 1992 200-meter breaststroke gold medalist, was having something called the Gold Medal Clinic, how to learn wave breaststroke. And back in the early 90s, is that wave breaststroke, which is now just kind of like your normal stroke, was something of an innovation. And being a geek and just wanting to learn, I wasn't aware that I was obsessed with that. And he was trained by a Hungarian swim coach while he was in high school and kind of later on. And that's when I was realizing, wait a minute, it's global. This isn't like whatever is happening in USA. But on the other hand, right now we have that opposite problem that anyone in the U.S. doesn't know what they're doing. So I'm more of a okay, who's winning and how are they winning, and is there a pattern? And for me, it's like I am a little bit jingoistic with the coaches that are here in the U.S. because I do have patriotism, but I'm also not blind to seeing that someone in Switzerland or a coach in Finland is doing something special. So that's when I was exposed to like medicine ball training. Back in the day, I don't know if I've been looking online like every couple months, hoping and praying, but the Nemo medicine ball that was like the most durable thing, it was like the Terminator. I used that in 1993, and that's how I got exposed to like Perform Better, the catalog. You go to Swimming World, look in the back, and see all these medicine balls. Like, I need medicine ball training to develop my torso. And that's when it's like, okay, like you're trying to control your own destiny in the off season, try to be a better athlete. Clearly, I did try to do everything I could, and that's how I got exposed. That this is a global, different perspectives. What are they doing in the Caribbean? What are they doing in the Scandinavian countries? What's the difference between what you'd see in Romania and what you'd see like in the small club in Prague? I think that whole holistic approach. What are they doing in New Zealand right now with the World Cup rugby? It's like Australians are actually coming over to the U.S. and the NBA more than ever, and people are starting to say, okay, the grass is greener, across the pond. But for me, that's my perspective. I have no bias. I just say, okay, what's working? And I don't care if it's sports psychology, which I'm focusing 100% of my time now, is to say it's not what you know, it's what you can get your athletes to do in the environment that they're in.
Gotcha. Now, how did you end up kind of from working with a few athletes down in Tampa to up in Massachusetts and traveling back and forth? I mean, do you have your own place up in Massachusetts and Tampa, or what kind of?
No, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And it's funny right now. I'm trying to I'm focused on this conversation, but I'm getting messaged by an athlete in Israel who's a professional soccer player. The lower divisions, obviously, and how I got started was as simple as like you first start off. I trained NFL linebackers at a Gold's Gym in Tampa Palm, so that if anyone, I'm not sure if it's still there, that's when you could just get a very inexpensive membership. And for some reason, they weren't really, asking to get a piece of the action. A lot of what I was doing was, adult babysitting back in the late 90s because I didn't, not that I know what I'm doing now. It's just very embryonic in terms of, my understanding of weights. But around early 2000s, my grandfather had some complications with Parkinson's. So a lot of people that know me realize that I was raised by my grandparents. So that really guides me in terms of some of my mannerisms, some of my thought processes. My grandfather was a chemical engineer. He passed away a couple days before the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004. And the great thing is he wasn't a baseball fan. So I always thought like, oh man, if you could have seen since 1918 we haven't won, and now there's been 3 titles, and so it's a little bit different. But that basically I started coaching, focusing on high school swimming and high school track, and that was difficult to do because it's a year-round sport to prepare. Might not be year-round competing, but preparation. And then right around 2008, I started realizing that if I wanted to get guys, on that B circuit to go from the poverty line to something like $40,000 to $80,000, we needed a warm weather camp. So we did a lot of stuff. Anyone that knows me, I go down to Tampa. I try to get down there as much as possible because I'm a soft tissue therapist, Travis Skaggs, who's been a huge mentor to me. And we use him. We send pro guys down. It's funny you mentioned Scott Umberger. Awesome coach, awesome dude. Sent him, one of his NHL guys is getting some therapy down there. If you look at the website, it's like Netscape Navigator. So people they're looking at it like they don't feel confident. But 50 Olympic medals and like 100 World Championship medals. There's a pattern, and I'm a soft tissue therapy fan. I think it's probably arguably more important than maybe sometimes coaching. And we've done some really cool things with tensormyography, myotone, elastography, everything, blood analysis. Obviously, I work with Inside Tracker. We go down there and we're seeing magic, resurrections. And I share the data. I talk about stem cells. He's crazy stuff what we're seeing down there. So it's long-winded. If it's on tangents, I'll look at Yosef's. If he starts rolling his eyes, that will make sure I move to the next question.
No, it's good, man. And trust me, I would love to. Perhaps another time we can get you again, get more into that. For now, again, Yosef and I, we're not the brightest bulbs on the tree, so we want to steer it towards at least the practical side, because most of our listeners will be coaches. And then I'd love to get into myofascial stuff and everything like that, because that stuff also fascinates the hell out of me. And I'd love to get into that. But as for right now, so okay, let's kind of get into some of the practical. So, if coaching, is an art form, kind of what is your canvas? Where do you kind of start? When you work with, let's say, the soccer player. You're just talking about a soccer player.
It's okay. So I'll cut the check. I think that's the term.
Yeah.
For me, there's a term I've been using one of the All-American swimmers I worked with, Tucker Wetmore. I sat down with him his freshman year and I said, "Do you want to be nasty? Do you want to get the world, world record? That would have been
nice.
a different discussion. A state record. We had a project state record. He missed by like 100th on the 50-yard freestyle. I came up to him and I said, "Hey, boring works," and that was because a lot of things I was saying is workouts were always random to try to enter-train people. And I said, do whatever it takes to win and to get faster. And if that means nutrition, we put so much into nutrition, it was like ungodly. Because I know that at the end of the day, the high impact things might not be compliant with athletes. So like sleep and nutrition, we know it works. But to measure it, to evaluate it, to coach it up, it's much different. You can go to the weight room for an hour 3 days a week, but you're not going to be there 21 times while they're eating. So I've had athletes live with me. One of my first in-house, like I call it barbell and breakfast, was a football player from Notre Dame. And, I literally fed him pancakes. The protein, we called them man cakes because you put the protein powder and the healthy eggs. I say, okay, if I know what stuff is going to make people better, I don't care emotionally if it's not something that's sexy or cool. Periodization, I believe it's planning, and it starts with my canvas starts with the calendar. How many days do I have? How many weeks is going to take? And where are we in terms of some sort of objective measurement? And where do we need to go in a rate that will keep them interested in buying into the program? Because sometimes you might not be able to do well until someone tapers. There's a lot of, some sports, you just don't see that type of gel until the end. So for me, it's really boring, and maybe this is going to cause people to fall asleep in the podcast, but if you have to make a choice as a coach. Are you trying to win? Or are you trying to be cool in coaching to entertain yourself? How many times is it really boring to watch someone stretch? Now, before I get into the discussions on does length change in tissue, my whole point of that is to say whatever it takes to win, make sure you do it, and then focus on those things and find a way to make it a little bit better athlete user experience. So there's a lot of things I look at, like hydration. It's boring. Like stopping practice and making sure that you're looking around and having, 20 out of 20 kids in the soccer training group, go to their water bottle, you see the measurement, you're seeing the decrease, the ounces, whatever. Those things work, but what coaches want to look at, like I use electrical muscle stimulation. Only a small percentage of my athletes do it. But what's the first thing that people call up when they're talking to me? It's always like, Carl, we want to go and look at such and such with force plates. And I'm like, all right, you are a JV high school tennis female coach. Are you guys doing lunges? I'm like, everyone's interested in the sex appeal. So for me, be like a computer in terms of what data is necessary to win, and then be a human and make it really exciting and add passion and make the things that are monotonous fun. Be a DJ when you're having your practices to make sure that there's good music, good vibe. Some people say, okay, music hurts your androgens, or music will make you the next Usain Bolt. I say, whatever you can get people to do that other people aren't willing to do is probably an advantage. Everyone's lifting hard at the collegiate football level. But the real thing is okay, sleep. Friday, Saturday night. It's like, everyone talks about sleep. If I hear or one more tweet about sleep, I'm going to ask, show me your team data for 365 days and show it. Show me your sleep. Okay, and then show me how you improved it. Education, it's not education. Oh, you don't know as a modern athlete that sleep and eating right's important? So the educators are fooling themselves. Like, oh, we bring in a motivational speaker, a nutritionist comes down, does the PowerPoint nonsense. Yeah, that's going to move the needle. What really is to say, okay, can you get for example, waffles? You can drown it and not have fruit with them and just have like that syrupy, blueberry concoction that you see from the dorms. Or can you say, okay, how can we, with our budget, find a way to get people eating healthy, and how can we prepare meals smarter? And, Jim Snyder, a guy, he's called me, I think, a month ago on an October game saying, Carl, what's the healthiest way we can get a whole bunch of guys while we're playing BC to have meals that are either catered or be at a restaurant that can hit these criteria? That is very boring to call up and talk about catering. But the guy's smart because he knows nutrition wins, and you can't do that, half effort. So for me, it's like when I look at the calendar of time, that's my first constraint. Other constraints are budget. Okay, does the athlete, I worked with an athlete I didn't know in high school had a job, while competing. So, these relationships things, I think you got to profile the athlete, tease out little constraints of what's going on. Um, are they, look at culture. A lot of athletes might be raised by a father or mother that has maybe a competing view of nutrition and recovery. Have you ever visited their house? What's their, one of the things that everyone talks about is like, okay, sleep. Everyone say make your room a cave. Well, unless you're stumbling to go at night, if you have to use the men's room, if you can walk around without tripping over things, you're probably not pitch black. So, like, you have to know these things, and the best way to do is to get objective data. So, again, my thing is like the competitive gap or that margin is going to be where things people aren't aware of, which is harder to do now with the internet age. And then what is the user experience to get people to do things that they might not want to do that much? And I try to do damage control. You don't want to get people to become into monk mode, because they go into Vegas mode, months later. You get the guy that's waking up, eating everything right, and then they explode. They go into a rock star mode, and, they wake up in a hotel's vandalized. It's like, there's, people of lesser qualities that are, I won't get into what's pro sports, DUIs, like, it's just crazy. So a lot of these guys, it's like damage control. You got to have a rhythm within the season so they can enjoy themselves, but because you're trying to, in team sport, be better than the other guys. In Olympic sport's more absolute. So my friend and mentor, Håkan Anderson, said, team sport, you want to optimize, and then Olympic sport, you got to maximize. And that's why sometimes injuries will happen with Olympic sport, because what's the limits? An Achilles tendon, you're some sort of type of fatigue that just, neurologically just wipes the guy out for a month. So, I mean, that's a lot to scatter at you, but that's how I look at it. Is calendar, constraints of what the situation, the environment is, and what things we can move through to do damage control.
Okay. Wow, that's a ton of information. With that, now I know how you do the blood analysis with Inside Tracker, which I've used personally, and I have clients of mine use it. A great company, not particularly meant to be a plug, but it's a great company. I highly recommend it. But along with that, what other type of assessments do you kind of start off with again, that soccer player or a particular athlete, or just athletes in general? Where do you kind of start?
I'm going to go and compare team sport versus Olympic sport.
Okay.
And a lot of people, when they say, okay, what do you do at Inside Tracker? It's Chief Innovation Officer. Actually, that would be a good title. It's Director of Innovation. And then people can say, what does that mean? 90% what I do is nothing to do with blood analysis. Once in a while I'll blog, but for me it's about getting into the heart of the matter and try to make improvements. So the reason I went with blood analysis, there's so many different possible data sets that are out there. I always jump on the grenade and choose the hardest thing to do. So nutrition, to me, it's the hardest to measure. Heart rate sensor, you're going to get that data, first beat, polar, omega wave, athlete, whatever. Activity tracking, you're going to have all that stuff, all the wearables. But how do you measure nutrition? Body composition, right? Someone's leaner, but are they in shape? They could be basically a mannequin. So for me, it's like I always try to jump on the grenades, because the hardest things, if you can make those easy, all the easy things it's just domino effect. So when I do an assessment, I also know when to say, I'm just basically a conductor. There's the woodwinds, the percussions. Okay, they can play that. I can't do that. I'm not an orthopedic specialist, so when I go and take an athlete in, one of the guys I've been using that I'm a big fan of is Carl Faust. I've used him just only a couple times. I've used some other physical therapists, and there's a lot of great people that I've worked with over the years that are great assessments. So the first thing is a medical history. Medical imaging, I know it's not, some people, you can't, it's, MRIs doesn't mean it's functional. I look at the simple thing, biomaterial. If you have no Achilles tendon, you're not winning the 100-meter dash. And so there's a difference between degeneration, a disc bulge, that type of stuff. I like to keep on the medical side and let them do their work. But for me, it's biomaterial is something that's really important to me, because you can't function with a real bad fracture. You can maybe run from the bear for a little bit of time, but you're not going to win sport. So there's a difference between, some people think there's a difference, that there's no difference, and that's why they're not in sport. And, they get on their soapboxes and poo-poo the idea that sometimes elite sport is different than, like I have a grandmother and we go food shopping. And there's things that I expect her to do that I know are nothing to do with elite sport, because good health ends when good sport begins. There's a book from Hank Krajinoff that says, it's called Mortal Engines, and explains the differences. So, the medical side, I send them there and say, okay, what are we working with? Is this guy should be getting surgery? There's a lot of times you'll find someone that has, a severe issue. If you have stress fractures, it's not a pain issue. And pain science, I leave to the experts in sports medicine. I'm aware of it and try not to because the kids right now, they'll go on Wikipedia, and the next morning they wake up, Coach, I have a torn labrum. I'm like, well, what? My hip is bothering me. It's like, okay, they're a little sore because, they went and did some biking routine. But because of that nature, these nocebos that are happening, I try to make sure we have a healthy sports psychology screening first. So I know, are they basically a hypochondriac? Are they stubborn? So when they see something, like I knew an athlete that I was talking to, he had a black and blue foot, and he was not reporting. He reported no discomfort on his subjective questionnaire. Right, broke his foot, and it was just turning purple. I was like, okay, I'm not an expert in sports medicine. Go get that checked out. And then an X-ray showed it looked like a car accident. So I think the sports psychology profiling the brain is going to be the next region. And for me, it's like, how do you measure laziness? When an athlete goes through and kind of doesn't make eye contact when they're getting instruction, they're going through the motions. You've seen it, an athlete that's really engaged, and they look like they're trying to like crack a walnut with their brain and just focusing on that exercise, or they're looking looking the other way, not paying attention. So for me, it's there's a brilliant woman called Natasha Schull, and I might be butchering the name, and she's at MIT, and she's looking at the quantified self, and she's an anthropologist, and it's just amazing to see, the whole human element and behavior patterns. So for me, it's like, how does someone not necessarily think, but how they act? And I try to do that, the body, the mind, and then the culture of where they grew up. Then it's easy. You can do, and I don't want to get into any technology really, but you can do the jump testing on force plates. You can do heart rate variability. Blood draws are important because, how many NFL guys are blowing up, and that's my soapbox, malnourished millionaires. Like, for me, yes, be confused about sex hormone binding globulin and trending. If you have malnourished athletes, that's a problem. So for me, it's like, I have a rhythm. It's very simple. I like to have heart rate variability every day, right? It's very cheap. You can do it now. It's going to be on the camera phones are getting better. The technology is becoming there. Subjective, little like a haiku, so you can get some tease, just communicating with the athlete, their voice. You can do a video clip. You can get facial coding. For me, I like to eat with the guys. First of all, it's just fun eating out. And then you can start seeing things that you can't really get from a wellness questionnaire. It's in your head. So I think the more contact that you have with someone, the better. That's why I'm not a big fan of correspondence work, because you're missing those little idiosyncrasies. So, after you do I know this is not really organized, but once you do the orthopedic evaluation, you can say, hey, does this guy need a complete rehab? Time after time, guys are competing, they lose in the playoffs, and it's like, oh, the season's over. Well, they've been nagging with injuries. Go see a sports medicine professional, finish your rehab. How do you know the rehab's finished? Because you can train hard. None of this workaround stuff, we're using an alternative series of exercises. If you can't train properly, you're going to paint yourself into a corner. So for me, the best way to evaluate good training is can you do 100% of the stuff that got you there? When you start saying, well, we're going to do a workaround and plan B, hey, we all have to do it. People get injured, stuff happens. But when you start painting yourself into a corner and start saying, well, we're not going to do any Olympic lifts with barbells because he's got a bad insert X, well, if you're permanently damaged, I understand it. Plastic deformation of tissue, you can get some bad stuff happening that you might not be able to have a secure way of training. But I'm a big fan of saying, okay, if you're training properly full time at 100% of what you need to do to get better, then that's the ultimate screen. Movement screens are good. 3D motion capture, whether you're using I'm a big fan of Noraxon, the system that's using, integrating all this stuff. But that's, pressure mapping was going to explode. I mentioned this to Jay. Locomotion. Sometimes we can eyeball it. We can get a lot of stuff if you're really knowledgeable, but sometimes you need to tease that stuff out with objective measurements. So I'm a big fan of like shotgun approach, get all this information out, and then now you know what you're working with. And my training is extremely boring. Please, if you want to visit me, you're going to see a warm-up for 40 minutes. I've written the same thing in 2005, 2006. You do slow to quick, you do some skips. Everyone's doing the same stuff. But for me, the length of time is, you see the NFL. So, general managers, go off the corporate area of the building. If you want to know why teams are getting hurt, look at the length of the warm-up, if they do one. So, catapult data is an awesome opportunity. Did you warm up at all? Yes or no? Forget about big data. Did you warm up? Yes or no? Stretching and talking and maybe building team morale by weaving in. Yeah, that's nice to do. But are you doing something locomotive on your feet to get ready for the game or practice? And, okay, was it 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? What does it look like? I don't care if it's, wireless EMG, whatever. Are you warming up? And John Smith, a coach to some of the greatest sprinters ever, he spoke at the Massachusetts Track Coaches Association, and it was awesome. It was very blue collar, and he was like, cook the bird to the bone. So if you're not getting hotter, I did a presentation in Nashville on the tissue warming up, and we actually used timing gates. We used the Freelap and using thermography, and okay, you got to warm up. And there's a difference between some of the stuff that you're seeing with Mobility WOD and some of the self therapies. Hey, if you need to do certain exercises, fine. I'm not there to judge. But if you're not doing the fundamentals and just lying on the track like a beached whale, not a good plan to get prepared as an athlete. Be on your feet. So for me, the most boring thing to talk about, and I'll always preach, is warming up. It's like a checklist for a pilot to see, hey, certain things are working. Athlete, they feel good. They're jiving. That's the number one thing. And whether you do 6 times 30-meter sprints or 6 times 20-meter sprints or 88%, 92%, do your plyos first and sequence it with medicine ball throws, that matters. But for me, when I look at the calendar, if I got a guy to give A- training, I'm not the best coach. I'm above average. I look at it and I say, I'm not hurting people like crazy, but I'm not Dan Paff, who is, just got another gold. All I look at and say, if I can train really hard and with my plan for 42 weeks a year, and this other guy is training 34 weeks a year, no one in periodization. You'll never see anyone like Bondarchuk. He's not going to write in rehab phase, block 2. Injuries. Everyone's kind of, so when you're whole planning, I look to me and say, don't do anything stupid that's going to lead to perhaps a manifestation of serious injury. Nixon, that stuff happens. It's wear and tear. But that's what I look and say, okay, I'd rather just do enough, as much as necessary, as Hank has always said, and then just measure. I don't care if I have to use hammer strength machines, in a circuit, 8 exercises, 8 reps to failure 1 or 2 times. If that's going to lead to success, great. What we do know is that you're probably going to have to do a wide range of things, usually ground-based, usually barbell and med ball type activities. and do the sport itself. The strength and conditioning supports the on the field or on the track stuff. So that's how I look. I can't rush things. If someone says, I have 8 weeks with you, and the year before I had an athlete that had 12 weeks, and he wanted the same results. He goes, Coach, we barely PR'd on a couple of my lifts. I said, gave me 8 weeks. Usually give me 12. So either I'm a sorcerer doing magic, or we had a pretty good session. It just forgets what's the percentage of time that you're working with. So for me, those things are more important than whether you got I'm using I'm using a French training system, or I'm using South African periodization. Okay, but everyone's on YouTube and Facebook. It's the world's flat. So that's a rant. It's probably about time to go to the next question.
Man, you covered a lot. Joseph, got anything to add to that before we move on, sir?
Yeah, I was kind of curious. Once you got started and got moving in the field, how was your introduction to what was going on internationally, and how did you see the distinctions, or what was your first introduction to kind of seeing that there's this whole other world out there that a lot of American coaches a lot of times don't know about?
Yeah, and this is the whole internet age. I was at the USF library, and I was just I had a laptop. I had a power book. I forget what I had. I had a Mac laptop, and this was 97, 96, and I was Ethernet just got started, and I was dial-up was all the rage. AOL, I got free AOL. So I went to the library, and I love libraries. One of my when I was in grade school, Pat Keogh was a librarian, and she just made the whole process of going to the library and learning. She literally, when you're in 3rd grade, and she dressed up as a witch, and during Halloween, and can't do that stuff now because we live in a very politically correct world where you get letters from people that are Wiccas, but that type of process made the information, not just with technology from the internet, but a book. So for me, it's just it starts with the getting access to books, because people are dead now that wrote some amazing stuff. So for me, I love books. I know that's not a very popular thing. I like going to the exact research first. Then I look at I look at research books, new studies in athletics, all that other stuff that you can get on track. And then I saw a website, and it was just really crusty. This is, again, 96, 97, Netscape Navigator. And, people were talking from Europe. Oh, my God, they're writing stuff on the screen, and there's message boards and all that stuff. And I was then Super Training List became, for me, it's I saw a debate, and it just, even though it was early 2000s, that's when for me, that was a milestone to say, no one has all the answers. It was Hawk and Anderson, Hank, Charlie Francis, a couple other people were battling. It was epic. It's I was looking at it, and someone's okay, this is about fiber typing. So Charlie was talking about capillary density, and then Hank was, Hank being Hank, he's he always throws a joke at you, so it makes you laugh. He makes the joke on your expense and very clear, so you feel stupid. And then he cuts deep, as Landon Evans says, with really good wisdom. And so that's when I really realized, okay, I can't just be cheering one person. So for me, being respectful to all these people, I saw patterns. Australian, New Zealand, that South Pacific type region, what's going on in Japan, which is highly unique compared to either South Korea or China, what's going on in Western Europe. Eastern Europe is much different, and then, of course, the dark continent with Africa. I think we don't give credit to a lot of stuff that's going on. We make these assumptions, and, I'm coming across, hopefully not as a pontificating person, but I feel we don't give credit to people that don't have big budgets. We don't give credit to people that we are stereotyping as not developed, because when you don't have budgets, I've been in that situation. I've had no gym. You become crafty, you become resourceful, and I'm seeing some amazing stuff in South America, South Africa. We treat those people like it's disrespectful. The Caribbean coaches are amazing. I think we get so focused on genetics, and I think that's unhealthy because there's some brilliant coaches that, just because someone has a Jamaican accent, I find it very rude to say, well, they don't know what they're doing. They're getting all this talent. And to me, I look at it as like, what are they doing with what they have for resources? And to me, I look at that data as gold. The stuff that it's easy to say, okay, we're doing a muscle biopsy and we're doing magic. I think the main thing is to look and saying, okay, what smart decisions, not scientific necessarily, because sometimes you don't have access to the science. You're making really logical conclusions. So I look at everything. I think right now we look at the Soviet stuff, and I think that Eastern Bloc countries, I think we don't give enough credit because we say, oh, they're doping. Okay, they're not the only countries that have had some issues with drugs. So what I think it gives, what people do is they say, well, okay, these people are talented, these people are doping. For me, I try not to judge. It's hard not to with this politically correct society. You can't ask these tough questions. Like culturally, for example, the islands, like I go to the Caribbean or Florida because there's palm tree therapy. It's not that much pressure. I go to California. It's as Rudy Thomas would say, it's carpocalypse. Like it's just traffics are just gridlock. It's stressful. Even though it's Southern Cal, it doesn't have that nice relaxing vibe. So for me, it's like, okay, very structured communities, and it's not about necessarily saying, okay, ethnicity or countries. It's about, okay, be there and ask the honest questions. Is this environment doing something that's not related to training theory? For me, HRV, if you want to go to do training camps, it's not you get a nice little condo. Freelap has a training camp blog, and I'm afraid that people aren't reading that stuff. Something about just getting on the grass, jogging, and feeling good, it's huge. But that stuff you can't sell in a DVD. You can't sell a workshop on like team morale. It's kind of cheesy. People are like, okay, I'll do the motivational speaking another time. So for me, it's like you look for ways to get people to win and get better, and just don't be biased towards, okay, do I need to look at certain type of periodization? So I think periodization, people look at it, oh, it's doping cycles, true, but then don't throw the baby with the bathwater and say, okay, then they're going to say, forget about drugs, what about talent? Oh, well, he's just talented. Then the next thing is like, oh, he's got a great training environment. There's always excuses for not getting results. I look at sometimes excuses are being explanations. There's nothing wrong with recruiting in your program. I was miserable in recruiting in college. Didn't even know how to pass all the rules for NC2As. I mean, it's a book this thick. The first time I took the test, I saw everyone opening the book and reading it to pass it. And I was like, oh, everyone's cheating. I didn't realize that it was an open book. And I was like, you can't memorize 300 pages. So like recruiting, that's the other thing, is how are you getting talented people into your program? We want to start talking about what you do with what you get with an athlete. What about just break the rules to get better athletes? Have an awesome recruiting visit. But no one wants to talk about that. We always want to talk about, okay, what you do with the athletes. Now, I do think that right now it's appropriate to go move towards that and say, okay, now what? You got the athlete. Forget about the calendar. We talked about screening. I think the main thing is how to keep the athlete user experience, the journey, interesting so they're not bored, but not vary things to be, juggling and doing cartwheels. Then how to make the experience rewarding so they value it, not just saying, oh, he's he's got the DJ app on his iPhone and the music's good, but then you can get that in Texas. Does it matter? And the third thing is, after they do that, is basically teaching them to be independent. And I think that a lot of coaches might want to explain why their trainings, why they do certain things. I think that's a good starting point. But I think there's a lot of times a coach has to say, here's what I screwed up with, and this is why I've changed my mind. So it's an evolution. I think a lot of people change their mind a lot, but they're like on a treadmill. Okay, they're doing something different, but their program's not getting better. So those things are important to me. And I know that this is, again, without caffeine, I'm low on the juice right now. That's kind of a long way to say, here's my path. But to me, it's like, first thing I had, the best metric that I had one year, we had a girl, I was at community college, the budget was negative, I think. It's like, it was just tiny. We didn't even have a locker room. We had a changing area. It was a universal place with a fitness center. I will send and upload. I think it's the size of probably a refrigerator where the lockers are. Like, it had these tiny little lockers where you can probably put like your wallet in. Weight room was just one squat rack. It was the Reggie Lewis Center, and it was the best. That first year that I was there was one of the best coaching experiences of my life because I learned so much. Sports science was not there. Data was basically analog. It was my iPhone, and what I learned was the number one metric is a smile. So if you're not seeing smiles, and I did that interview with the guy in Estonia, Dr. Vuru. He says a smiling athlete is a growing athlete and an improving athlete. And I tell bad jokes. Sometimes you might get a grimace, but at least it's a healthy vibe. And for me, it's like, what makes them happy? And so I look at happiness plus solid training. It trumps the, like, okay, we're on this loading pattern, we're doing this. Again, 42 weeks of healthy training versus 32 weeks of injury training. And the brain, stress matters. I worked with a soccer athlete, work with a lot of soccer athletes now for some reason, just luck. I used to be more football. But one of the things in college guys that even they're on scholarship, if you look at their debit account, right, and you look at their cortisol, it's exactly the same. Cortisol increases when dudes start running out of cake. You're pumping gas and you're trying to do like the slow burn. Those are the things that are gnawing at them. So forget about like, I'm 68 degrees on my sleep, temperature. It's like, are they broke? Kid doesn't want to, okay, you feel stressed out. There's a lot of things like that. Not just about exams. A lot of kids like me I say, hey, I'm not going to lose sleep if I don't get an A. A lot of people don't put that type of pressure on them. And I'm not typecasting athletes as not caring about academics. But honestly, if you're doing a freshman lit class, no one's going to have to get therapy because they got a B instead of a B plus on their paper on Huckleberry Finn. I mean, come on. So the thing is, a lot of the stress is about that emotional side. Do you foster time away from training that you can ask about that stuff? If guys have an issue, I was talking to one coach, the kid had like a issue with a dental issue. It was really painful. And it's with dental insurance, it's scant. It doesn't have much options. And if like a molar issue, that's like $2,000. And if you look at your bank account, you're stressed out. You have $800. You got to pay rent. That's why college sports is. It's amazing that these coaches are like that are at the collegiate level what they're doing. And the problems get worse in the pros. You're getting a divorce. Your kid hates you because you're never around because you live off season here. You just got traded and daddy's not around, or you're playing tennis and you're on different continents. It's crazy. So those things to me are the stuff that gets results. How do you bundle it? How do you teach it? How do you make it scalable? I don't have the solution, but I know that you have to address the elephant in the room, which is what things matter. And I think everyone's a good coach. I think there's a lot of good coaches out there. But I think it's a life coach that you're looking for now, especially with broken marriages and relationships are now, I remember back in college, it was like, okay, you're nervous you want to pick up a a girl in college, nervous, you want to say something in statistics class. Now it's like Tinder, talk about where the human element's being lost in coaching. Right now everything is so virtual and augmented reality. I like deplugging. So again, that's hopefully it wasn't me being too preachy, but these things to me in coaching matter more than I believe in bar speed, but we have a problem with coaches not realizing that the elephant in the room is the bar. Guys getting wasted on Thursday nights. It's like, okay, do you want to look at bar speed or elbow speed of guys getting wasted? And it's like, okay, maybe 2 drinks instead of 18. Maybe that's damage control. That's the gap that you can manage. If you can kind of do damage control there, maybe less frequency, no one's passing out in the back of a Hummer limo, that's good. An advantage compared to the guys. But everyone's like, oh, message boards, guys are talking about this whey protein has these, it's from Wisconsin and the cows are doing this. And it's like, don't argue about amino acid profiles of protein powders when guys are going to fast food at 3 a.m. Look at, you have bigger fish to fry? And speaking about fried fish, it's like, guys, you see wrappers of Filet-O-Fish in the back of a car, don't worry about beta-alanine research being valid. So for me, I look at jumping on the things that I know matter, and I try to make it interesting and fun because it's a lot boring to do the basics. So, make the boring interesting, make the basics sound like the greatest thing since sliced bread. So, again, I'm repeating myself, so that's the thing to kind of close on, I guess.
Well, shit, if you're running low on juice because you haven't had caffeine, we'll have to talk to you when you have some caffeine to get more.
It's a rant. That's an easy thing to get some infusion of energy.
Yeah, man. That was that was a lot to chew on, and I hope our listeners can re-listen to this. And there's just a lot of nuggets of information in there, and thank you so much. We'll cut it. Yeah, we'll cut it here. I would love to, if possible, get you back on again, and we can get
sure.
more into it. But I'm sorry, what's up?
Yeah, so basically, anytime I'm on a podcast, it's usually like I just see a tweet, I go on this rampage with a little bit more collected thoughts and an editor to make sure my grammar doesn't look like garbage. Go on InsideTracker.com for my blog. I blog once or twice a month. I write a lot of articles for Freelap because I'm a track guy. I guest blog. I'm writing something for Central Virginia on a buying guide for technology. I'm nasty, saying be firm with these companies that you're buying $30,000, $100,000 systems for. So if you wanted a little bit more, something more solid than a few nuggets in there, that's where I basically, I'm able to write something a little bit more, refined, if you will. And also, the best thing I think is to also go on these podcasts such as yourself. I think what you guys are doing is awesome. And I think that's pretty much it. I hope that a couple things it's worth, if someone's stuck in traffic in the middle of some random road in Kentucky, they at least have something to chew on.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much. Absolutely love to get you back and get more into the how you make your boring stuff sexy for
sure.
entertainment or whatever whatever entertainment or trainment the phrase I like that you used. And Joseph, any closing thoughts, sir?
No, thanks a lot. Like I said, it was interesting to kind of get an idea of where you come from. We had read some of your blog material, and I know Jay had you down. I wasn't able to get there this year, but Jay had you down, and so it kind of piqued our interest in, what you were doing over there in Massachusetts. So we were both curious and like to kind of next time maybe we'll get more in depth. Maybe into a few more nuts and bolts. But
I promise next time I'm going to be. I'll have an outline, and then what I'm going to do. I think the best thing to learn, the American Swim Coaches Association had this, I love it, the Gold Medal Clinic. And what I think is just good is to say, okay, here's the 52 weeks of training. Let someone see the actual workouts, and then just go over that. I think the next time, instead of being on the rant mode, I think every conference needs to follow the ASCA model where it's just like, okay, here's the workouts, all the workouts written up in a neat, form, printed out. No PowerPoint bullets and this is what we're doing. No, show me the workouts. Get from there, show why you did things, and explain the journey. And then from there, I'm going to be speaking at a conference in Missouri on basically monitoring. And I'm just going to show, and I'll make it public later, all the workouts. And you can judge me. Maybe that I made some mistakes. But I think the best way to debug a program is to make the source code available. But what we're seeing at these conferences, everyone wants to do TED Talks. And they want to look like they're doing, like they're on a stage and they're doing, hocus pocus. No, I think the best thing to do is to share what you're doing by being more transparent versus better presenter. The best presenters are the ones that just basically share what they do. So enough. Again, I ranted again. I got to stop.
Good,
I promise next time I'll get into the training, and then people that are watching or listening can have copies of the workout. Okay?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, that's kind of the focus of what we do. I'm not a scientist myself, and I've been in the field now over 20 years, but not a scientist by any means. And I'm too stupid to kind of get into deep theoretical arguments. I just want to know what you did. Did it work or not? And are you getting a better result than I am? And then I figure if you are, then I want to know what you're doing. If you don't, well, maybe not so much. I don't know. It's kind of like any other area of life. Somebody's doing something really well. You want to see how they're doing it. And, and see what you can emulate. And that's kind of where, the same focus that we have.
Let me do this. As an article, I'll write a timeline of what I was reading, who was I listening to, where I was attending conferences, so you can see the evolution.
Great.
Because it's better to probably say, hey, what conferences I attended, what did I change in my program?
Yeah.
I'm a classic USATF level 2 certified. I got to do my level 3 thesis on block starts. But I followed that 1998 Purdue, Boo Schexnayder and Andy Miller. Andy Roberts. Andy Miller is a massage therapist. Andy Roberts were my level 2 instructors, and I deviated probably about 10 to 15% on that. But that 10 or 15% is a huge gap, and it's because when you visit and you learn from others. Yeah. So I'll promise I'll do two things. I'll come back, get into the heart of the training, and we'll cover those workouts. B, make sure that I write something on a timeline and say, hey, this is the stuff I've learned from. If I had to go and spend money, I would have gone more to these type of conferences, and I would have probably left this other one. So again, thanks guys.
Yeah,
and
thank you very much. We appreciate it. It sounds like music. I like to hear that. We'll go right over the meat of everything, and that way we can kind of get inside your head as to what you were thinking at the different times and influences. Because I can relate. I mean, like I said, it's been over 20 years. What I was thinking in 1997 was retarded, and then beyond that, I mean, stupid stuff. And then I'm sure 5 years from now, I'll look back and what I'm thinking now will seem not so bright either.
One thing I have almost ready, which I'm going to release, is the books that are not on Amazon.com that you should buy. That's dirt cheap.
Okay.
So every listener needs to go to Bookfinder. I hate releasing my secrets, but Bookfinder, you can get like libraries. Unfortunately, they're shutting down. I brought that up. And a lot of these libraries are doing fire sales. And you're getting books that like are $80 to $150 on Amazon because they're rare books, like rarebooks.com or whatever. And I think there's an opportunity. Like everyone talks about, for example, French contrast training. Cal Dietz brought that up. Werner Gunther videos that I posted. You have to there's a French physiologist writing a book in Spanish. How do you find that book?
Yeah.
Science of Winning, which is an amazing book, is now on Kindle. Trying to find that was trying to find the Smurf Village. I was like, okay, I got the book. I lent it out, which I'll never do again. Now I digitize all of my books because, they come and see the library, and everyone's like, oh, excited. And then I'm like, well, what are you doing over there? Oh, I thought I was going to borrow this. I'm like, So then I spent a fortune on digitizing. But I think what the best thing to do is to liberate that list, get that out in the public so we can get everyone the same access to this stuff that you're not going to see on websites or blogs. Even my own blog it doesn't really get into those nuances. So, all right. Yes, I'm fired up. I apologize, but it's always exciting to talk about training.
Yeah, man.
Well, equally the same for us as well. Thank you very much for your time today.